Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our infrastructure panel. We're excited to have you all here and to listen to three very dynamic individuals who are helping lead this community forward. We're going to talk a little bit today about priorities and strategies related to future energy plans, weatherization efforts, and the City of San Antonio's current and proposed infrastructure budget priorities. We're, of course, thrilled to host Mr. Garza, Mr. Puente, and Mr. Walsh today. Welcome, gentlemen. So, as with all of our events, we cannot put them on but for the fantastic support of the San Antonio business community. And so I'd like to recognize our sponsors today. We have 6 of them, and so I will name them and then ask for a collective hand clap. So on behalf of the Chamber's 1,650 members, I would like to thank Brooks Development Authority, Itron Network Services, New Star Energy LP, OCI Solar Power, Pape Dawson Engineers Incorporated, and the San Antonio River Authority. Please join me in a round of applause for our sponsors. And again, we'd like to thank CPS Energy. Rudy, thank you for hosting us here in your beautiful new headquarters. We're also joined today by some of our fantastic elected and appointed officials, several from the San Antonio City Council. And so I will recognize them in a group, and then we'll give them a collective hand clap. We're joined today by District 6 City Councilwoman Melissa Cabello-Haverda, District 9 City Councilman John Courage, and District 10 City Councilman Clayton Perry. Please join me in a round of applause for our elected officials. Representing the CPS Energy Board of Trustees, we have today their Vice Chair, Janie Gonzalez. Madam Vice Chair, thank you for joining us. Representing the board of the San Antonio Water System, we're joined by the chair of their board, Jelyn LeBlanc Jameson, and one of their trustees, Eduardo Parra. Please join me in a round of applause for them. Representing the Brooks Development Authority, we have with us today several of their leadership members of the board and their CEO, Leo Gomez. The chair of the board of the Brooks Authority Board, and he's also the chair of the San Antonio River Authority, Jim Campbell. Jimmy, thank you for joining us. And also by 2 of their board members, Pat Hasso and Alex Lopez. Please stand to be recognized, and thank you for joining us. Representing the chair of the Port of San Antonio Board of Directors, Chris Aldrete. Chris, thank you for joining us. Thank you. We're thrilled that you're here. Also, I saw in the crowd my great friend and the CEO of the North San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, Cristina Aldrete. Colleague, where are you? Please stand to be recognized. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, I'd like to recognize an individual who has chaired the Chamber's Board of Directors during my tenure as CEO. He is a wonderful, wonderful man, an excellent business owner. He's the CEO of Pape Dawson Engineers, Sam Dawson. Sam, thank you for joining us. All right, so I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists, and then we're going to get right into it. And I want you all to think about questions. The goal here is to save some time at the end of the questions that I'll be asking, so that you all can, have some really good, strong, hard questions for our CEOs, because they're ready. We've been prepping for the last year and a half, and so they're all really ready to go. That was supposed to be funny, guys. All right. So we'll start with Rudy Garza. He's the president and CEO of CPS Energy, the nation's largest municipally owned electric and natural gas utility. Rudy has more than 25 years of experience as a leader in the utility industry and has served in both the public and private sectors over the course of his career. He is the first Hispanic leader to hold this position. Let's give him a round of applause. Rudy, thank you. Congratulations on the new position, on the permanent position. Next, I'd like to introduce Robert R. Puente, San Antonio Water System's president and CEO since May of 2008. He leads one of the nation's largest utilities, delivering water and wastewater services to 2 million customers. Robert, thank you for joining us. Let's hear a round of applause for Robert. And Eric Walsh, a native son of San Antonio, began serving as city manager on March 1st, 2019. As the chief executive officer of the municipal corporation of the city, he oversees 13,000 employees, manages an annual operating capital budget of $2.9 billion, and serves 1.5 million residents. Prior to being appointed city manager, Eric worked as deputy city manager and assistant city manager. Please join me in a round of applause for Eric Walsh, our city manager. All right, gentlemen, let's get into it. Rudy, I'll start with you since we're here in your home. Number one, congratulations on the permanent position. We're all excited, and I was happy to be here and to lend my voice to support you and your new endeavor as the permanent CEO and president. Can you share with the group your short-term vision and how CPS Energy is preparing for greater infrastructure needs going forward?
Well, first off, Richard, thank you all for hosting today, and I appreciate for anybody who's here for the first time, welcome. We're really proud of the work that the team has put into creating a space that we believe will take CPS Energy into the next hopefully 50, 60, 100 years. We'll be here, and we're real proud of it. So I hope you'll come back and see us often, and I'm glad you're here today. Let me start off by thanking my Vice Chair, Janie Gonzalez, and the board for their confidence in me. It is a really difficult process to go through when you're going through CEO transitions in any organization, and certainly our transition was not the easiest in over the last 15 months or so. And I just want to publicly thank Janie for her leadership and for the work that her and her colleagues do on the board. It's not easy managing and giving direction to an organization of this size and complexity. So Janie, thank you. Let me begin by saying that over the last 10 months of my tenure as interim and now permanent CEO, everything that the leadership team and I, most of who are in the room today, has been spending our time on is thinking about the future. And the board chair asked me to put together with my team a 5-year strategic plan. That plan is ready to go. We're going to start talking about it publicly. We'll talk about it as much as you all want here today. But CPS Energy really is focused on how do we transition ourselves into what's been really a cutting-edge utility over the 80 years that we've been in existence as a publicly owned entity here in San Antonio. How do we carry ourselves into the future? And we've got a lot of really important decisions to make in the short term, and then we've got execution to do over the long term that we're focused on right now. What is our generation mix going to look like? We've had great generation assets over the years, but times are changing, and we've got to upgrade our generation portfolio to allow us to meet the growth of the community in the future. The work that our team is doing to create a smart grid that self-heals and proactively tells us when there's a problem about to happen so we can avoid that outage. When we used to be responsive in the past, now we're trying to be proactive about going out there and managing those outages. And the systems that we use to communicate with our customers and to present information. We've got a 22-year-old operating system here at CPS Energy. We've got to upgrade that to get to the future. So, my time over the next 5 years is going to be spent in that space, and my vice chair is pushing me real hard to think about what comes after that. What does the next 10, 15, 20 years for CPS Energy look like? And my team and I have a strategic session down on Brooks. You left me out. I'm on the Brooks board too. Yikes. And we're going to spend some time together as a leadership team at the end of September, really charting our path for execution into the future. So I'm really excited about the future. I want everybody in the room to have confidence that CPS Energy is doing what we need to do to position ourselves to be the leaders that we've always been and will continue to be into the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Rudy. Robert, with your 31 years of experience in the state legislature as chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee and now as the CEO of SAWS, you have a strong knowledge of Texas water policy. Do you think that the state water policy has adapted to meet the water needs for the future of our state and our region?
Very quickly, no. But before that, let me talk about. You mentioned Brooks. Nobody introduced my daughter, Liana Puente. Hi, Liana.
Hey.
And just one other, if I may, Richard. Eric, Rudy, and I have been working on making sure that our community doesn't suffer the way they suffered during Winter Storm Uri. CPS and SAWS are very happy to announce September 21st is a joint board meeting. Our two boards are going to meet together in this building to pass a resolution, and not just a resolution that good things should happen, but actually hard, concrete things that we're doing to make sure our system is resilient, his system is resilient, because he can't do his job without water, I can't do my job without power. So September 21st, despite what some people say about it's not ready yet, it's ready. The agreement between us is ready, and we're going to have that meeting September 21st at 1 o'clock. And the great thing about it is that the city's involved, obviously because our mayor is on both boards. So back to your question, Richard. Thank you for that. Is the state of Texas ready? And the reason I say no is because this year the state water plan did come out. It shows that we're going to have a 70% increase in population over the next 50 years. It shows that the basic need that is out there is conservation and reuse. And these are things that are very, very important, and one way to get to the point of making sure we have water for our communities throughout Texas over the long horizon. But one of the things that we see is people talking about, for example, water conservation. Great idea, great way to conserve water, but y'all should do it. It's too expensive for us to do it. There's all kinds of reasons on why that particular community in Texas should not have to have the water conservation goals, for example, that San Antonio has had. And I was very lucky to be in front of a water conference that I spoke at last month, where luckily the speaker in front of me talked about what the state of Texas needs. And he mentioned A, B, C, D, and that is aquifer storage and recovery. San Antonio has the largest one in the United States. Brackish water. San Antonio just built a brackish desalination plant. Conservation. We have the nation's best water conservation programs, essentially using the same amount of water today as we did about 20 years ago. And D, direct recycled water. We have the nation's largest recycled water system. So that he was telling the audience that that's what the state of Texas should do. And I'm here to say that that's what we have done already. We, our customers, have allowed us to do that. So the state of Texas needs to get prepared to do that. There's always talk about funding. I'm guilty of it. I was in the legislature for 17 years, not 31 years. Is the state of Texas doesn't even adequately fund public education. And they're going to fund public infrastructure that technically cities, they are, local governments are responsible for. So we cannot rely necessarily on the state government. We have to rely on programs that we can develop on our own, such as SAWS did over the last few years.
Well said. We're very proud of course, the work that you all have done to secure our water future. You know, we still have this crazy rap that we don't have enough water for the future, but I am here to say that I do believe we do, and I hope that you would agree.
I do. Do you want me to talk about that? Okay. You know, obviously there was a situation where we had one source of water, Edwards Aquifer. Legislation was passed that said that we had to wean ourselves off of the Edwards, protect the endangered species, protect some of the water for the farmers and the other communities. And our permit, our ability to take water out of the aquifer was going to be legislatively mandated at a certain amount. Luckily, in 2007, we passed a bill that allowed that permit to go up, but SAWS in particular, in 2011, developed its largest source of non-Edwards water, and that was the Schertz-Seguin agreement that we have of bringing water in from Gonzales County. Very quickly after that, we had the second largest diversification from the Edwards, and that was our brackish desalination plant. And just in 2020, the largest diversification of the Edwards, and that's the Vista Ridge project that came online in 2020. So what we have now is a situation where we're very, very diverse as far as our water supply. Some cities, like Corpus, essentially 1 or 2 water supplies. Austin, 1 water supply. What we have is 9 different water projects from 15 different sources. So we are very, very diversified. We're very prepared for the future. We have water security at least for the next 70 years. The Vista Ridge contract, for example, is a 30-year contract. of bringing water in here. At the end of the 30 years, all of the, and the cost is the same throughout those 30 years. So think of anything that you buy, the cost is going to stay the same for 30 years. That's what we negotiated. Year 31, the price drops, and we already negotiated that price with the landowners. So it's a 60-year project in a sense where the price is the same for 30 years, it drops in year 31 for the next 30 years.
I think that deserves a round of applause. We are ready for the future. Eric, let's turn to you. Can you give us an overview of the drivers for infrastructure investment needs at the city? And does the city coordinate its infrastructure investment with these two utilities here? And does that help or hurt the process to coordinate?
Well, let me start with the second part of that question first. We do, actually this was a topic of discussion at a recent council budget work session. With our normal street maintenance program that is budgeted at, we spend north of $100 million a year on just street maintenance, and then large capital programs like the bond that the voters approved. Those projects, we sit down with the two utilities to layer in what infrastructure improvements they need to do. But we do not do a good job of it. And I think Robert and I have a meeting next Friday with our teams to kick that off. I mean, obviously we can plan for how to do that work over the next 5 years, but I think collectively, I think the three of us up here know that we need to do a better job. We have 3 council members in the audience. I know 2 of them at least have an example of a street in their district. Now, we need to improve communication to those neighborhoods or those businesses along the arterials. And then try to do better as a group up here to direct those resources. If there's a water main break in the middle of July, those things are going to happen, and we need to be able to respond accordingly. And I think our 2 teams, particularly with SAWS, are synced up, but we can always do a better job. What are the drivers for the city's infrastructure needs? Growth. Growth is one, lack of attention is the other. There are still parts of town that don't have curbs and sidewalks, and so how we plan accordingly for those areas of town was a huge driver in the council's consideration of selecting the bond projects that went before the voters in May. Well, we're also having to facilitate growth, and the growth estimates that Robert mentioned apply to us across the board from a municipal standpoint. How we respond to public safety, how we deal with library or quality of life neighborhood issues, but how we deal with streets, drainage, sidewalks, parks, community facilities. Those are the 2 things that drive us. And I'll distinguish a little bit about the third category that I think is our largest infrastructure issue before us over the next 5, 6, 7 years, and that's the airport. Which is not a fire station and it's not a library. It is a massive redevelopment that frankly will dwarf the $1.2 billion bond program that the voters approved. So a lot of it is thinking through, and the council has a lot of conversation about this, is not just what the needs are next fiscal year, but where are we trying to get 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. Everything is tempoed in a 5-year increment from a municipal bond standpoint. The commitment that the city has is that by the time the voters go to the ballot box in 2027 for the next municipal bond, 90% of the projects that the voters approved in May will either be done or under construction. We've got to keep that machine rolling, and I see John Carlson there in the back. John and Sant are on a number of projects downtown. We've got to keep those projects moving, so it's a balance, I think, at the city to making sure that we're taking care of those areas of town that have been neglected or haven't seen the infrastructure improvement. We're taking care of issues of growth, and we've got our eye on the future on things like the airport.
Excellent. Well, we're all excited about the airport for sure. That is an opportunity for us to shine and to continue to attract visitors and businesses and move folks from one place to another. So thank you for that commitment. Robert, we'll move on to you for the second question. San Antonio is one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S., as you well know. How is SAWS responding to the demands of serving this growing population?
If I can change your question a little bit, Richard, it's how have we responded? And it's not like we've been growing over the last 2 or 3 years. We've been growing at a very nice clip for over 20 years. And so San Antonio SAWS has had to get ready to make sure we have the water supply for our community. And if you recall, there was attempt upon attempt upon attempt to get water supplies into this community, and they failed. A lot of you can remember Applewhite 1 and 2, a disaster. They were voted down by the public. You know, here we were trying to create a water project, but there was enough opposition to it where a petition drive put it on the ballot, and it was defeated. And so I can cite 2 or 3 other projects like that that just fell to the wayside, where we spent millions of dollars, yes, millions of dollars, on water supplies projects that just did not come into San Antonio. GBRA, Guadalupe Blanco River Authority is one of them. LCRA, Lower Colorado River Authority, is another one, where those projects just did not come into fruition. But luckily, I say responded because it's past tense, is the Church-Seguin project that's bringing water in here from 2 counties to the east. It's an agreement with the smaller cities of Church and Seguin. They had built a pipeline already. They were already bringing water into their community. We reached an agreement with them where we essentially are renting space in their pipeline because they had capacity in there. We were able to not have to build our own pipeline, which means a lot of construction cost, a lot of engineering cost, a lot of easements that would have been necessary. So we saved ourselves, for example, in that project, $88 million by not having to build a pipeline. And the cities of Church Seguin were able to lower their water rates because they were getting revenue from SAWS for the rental, in essence, of that pipeline. So that's one project. The other one is in southern Bexar County. There's a fresh aquifer, Carrizo, but there's also the Wilcox, which is a salty aquifer. That community out there, Pleasanton, Floresville, can't use that water because it's too expensive. We're lucky in San Antonio, we have a very large rate base, so we can afford to drill through the fresh aquifer into the salty aquifer because that aquifer nobody is using. That aquifer goes from here to Arkansas. And so we're able to draw that water out, clean it up, and put it into our distribution system. Vista Ridge. We didn't want to go through where we were going to spend millions of dollars again and not get a water project. So what we decided to do is just transfer all of the risk over to the private sector. They're the ones that built the pipeline. They're the ones that got the permits to go under railroads, over railroads, under rivers, all kinds of things like that, endangered species permits if they needed to them. They got all the easements. Pape Dawson was very involved in getting all those easements. They were part of the private sector that helped build this. But it was going to be more expensive that way. But we were willing to do that because the risk was just too much for a public entity to take. And that risk is not just the construction, not just the financing, but the risk really was the groundwater district 142 miles away that at any time could say your permit is cut in half, a third or whatever, and you still have to pay for that project if they do that. We transferred that risk over to them. So yes, Vista Ridge is an expensive project at the time, the most expensive water project in Texas, the largest P3 water project in the United States. But as I said, as years go by, new water projects are going to be more expensive than that. And so in year 5 and year 10 and year 15, when you look at the price we're paying for this project, Vista Ridge, it's going to be a bargain. So we have responded already to that need. I think we're there, but we can't just sit down. We always need to still do those very, very basic things of water conservation. As green as it may sound, as environmentally friendly as it may sound, for us, water conservation is a water supply, but water conservation also is a financial tool. Think about it. If we would have had did not have the water conservation programs, our per capita use, our use per individual from the 1980s, for example, to today, if we had that same use, we would have had to have 2 or 3 Vista Ridge projects, 2 or 3 D-cell projects, 2 or 3 Church Seguin projects. But we didn't. We had one of each through those years. And millions, billions of dollars involved in that. Water you do not have to use, you don't have to treat. So instead of building a new wastewater treatment plant, we actually closed one of ours. We had 4, we closed one. And so we're saving ourselves a tremendous amount of O&M cost every year by not having to run that plant. If we had not had water conservation, we would have had to build a new wastewater treatment plant at a cost of close to $2 billion if you're talking about a brand new plant. So those are things that we've done, and the thing we have to continue to do is water conservation.
Excellent, thank you. Eric, tell us about the capital plan that's contained in this year's budget that you proposed to the City Council, and what are some of the major infrastructure projects, and how were they selected?
So next year's capital plan is a little over $640 million. The primary driver of that is really the launching of the 5-year bond program. So 182 projects that the voters approved, and the council will in November be selecting all the engineers, architects, and landscape architects for all 182 projects, and we'll launch into design. So all of that is included within our capital budget. We will be design heavy in years 1 and 2, and then construction heavy beginning in 3, 4, and 5 on all those projects. And all that's laid out. The other major component in our capital plan for next year is a fair amount of facility work. Last summer, in preparation of the bond program, we the city staff spent a lot of time looking at a lot of our facilities, and the process to determine what project is going to be on a $1.2 billion list. The first session the council had almost a year ago today was $3.3 billion. So that list has got to get whittled down, but that doesn't mean we don't have facility needs. So the capital plan for next year has 17 parks and rec facilities, primarily in the older parts of town, that will go through renovations and improvements. 8 libraries that did not make the bond list. We have a plan over the next 5 years to replace 5 fire stations that we weren't able to do through the bond program. Those are all things that I think the public expects us to keep up with. The other major component of the bond program next year is the beginning work of some of the enabling projects out at the airport. We have, later on this year, we have 3 new gates opening up at the airport, 1 in Terminal A and 2 in Terminal B. Those gates, we could have leased them over 4 times over, because the airlines are getting each other in the parking lot over who's got gate access. So there certainly is the demand. Getting those projects done at the end of the year is going to be key. And then we'll be looking at potentially a ground loading facility out at the airport. That's included in the capital plan. So really facility heavy, and we still have $75 million in parks improvements, capital improvements in the program next year. So really launching off into a multitude of areas. One area that is a capital program for us, but maybe something that we don't think of as necessarily an infrastructure project, is the launching and the turning on of our public safety radio system, which for the first time ever, and previously that had been a city-county radio system, but for the first time ever will be, the 2 utilities will also be on that radio system, and CPS has been a major partner with the county and the city on that program. That will launch off at the beginning of 2024, and Saul as a subscriber, and that capital improvement, that capital investment means that the police officer, the firefighter, the linesman, the employee from SAWS, the public works individual can, at the turn of a switch, all be on the same radio system, which, as we know, is critical, especially in times of emergency. So that's a major part as we conclude that capital project later on this year.
And Eric, can you remind us, how much are we doing in paving every year?
So next year, the proposed budget that the council will consider for adoption next year is $116 million in street maintenance work, and we've got 4,400 miles that we maintain here in the city. All told, we have $154 million in next year's budget for infrastructure maintenance. And when I say infrastructure maintenance, we've got a whole host of new traffic signal intersections that'll be coming on. We have $21 million in next year's budget for additional sidewalks, but $116 million is dedicated towards street maintenance.
Excellent, thank you. Rudy, the next one will go to you. How are you managing through supply chain challenges? I know that's a theme for many of the businesses here today, but I've heard you talk about it at the public meetings that you'll have, your board meetings. Tell us about the challenges that you're having with limited capacity of resources, increased prices, et cetera, and how are you all managing through that?
Great question, Richard. I want to first make a comment about the Alamo Area Radio System project that Eric mentioned. Those are the types of cooperations that don't get a lot of media coverage, but when you have all your entities that use the same technology generally come together, to invest in a joint system, rather than individually we spend in $50 or $60 million a piece, we're all spending $25 million a piece, getting a better system collectively. And guess what? Now my linemen can call the fire department on the 911 channel saying, hey, I got an emergency out here. We need some help. And so those are the kind of projects that don't get a lot of coverage, but they show the type of efficiency that your local governmental entities are trying to work on together. And I'm super proud of that ARS project because we were the first ones in the hopper. We're actually going through the testing process now. We've got the radios, we're using them, and our team out in the field loves them. It's been and that was my number one complaint when I was over our distribution operations division, for 4 or 5 years, was the radios didn't work. Well, guess what? We put a project together, and now the radios work, and I really appreciate Eric.
Rudy and I always talk to each other on the radio, too.
Yeah. But our leadership team will have radios. We may not know how to use them, but we will have them. Let me go back to Richard's question, and I think it relates to, how does the community prepare for growth going forward? Because for this year, for the first time in 2 years or 3 years now that we've been dealing with supply chain challenges, we're starting to see an impact on residential subdivisions, on multifamily development. When we saw this coming, CPS Energy got immediately out ahead, and I think by and large we are still ahead of our peers in the industry on how we're dealing with supply chain challenges. But one of the first things we did was, I sat in a meeting in this building with all of our residential developers through the Greater San Antonio Builders Association and said, hey, we've got this challenge coming up. Rather than fighting for the transformers that we do have, let's come up with a process where we can work together to make sure that you're scaling your projects so that when you need the transformers, we're going to plan for them to be there. And and I'm not getting a lot of calls from developers. I know there are constraints, and I know there have been delays based on a number. I get a spreadsheet that's about 12 pages long. That the first probably 4 or 5 pages are red items that mean they're stocked out. That's gas risers for new construction. Those are meters. We're looking for every meter in town that needs reconditioning, pulling it out of the field if it's not serving any load, and reconditioning and putting it back out in the field. We're changing our design standards up to take advantage of whatever transformers we have to use, so that maybe if we don't have a 75 kVA transformer in stock and we need to use 100, or maybe cut the number of transformers we need in half and use 150s, that we can do that, and take advantage of the stock that we do have. But this global supply chain issue, it's not, it's almost like the auto, manufacturing. Toyota, I know, has had the same issue. They got 98% complete with their truck, and they're missing a chip because that one chip made in Indonesia or wherever it is, isn't available. Well, we're seeing the same thing. We may be able to build a meter, but that one piece of copper that we need, is in short supply, or resin, for the plastics plants that make our conduit isn't available. And you can go down the list of all the things that we use on a daily basis. I sent a letter to the Public Utility Commission I don't know, Kathy, about a year ago, maybe now, 8 months, telling them this is something that the legislature needs to consider. Do you need a strategic reserve of transformers or pipe or whatever it is that we might need? I'll tell you, if and I'm from Corpus Christi, so my awareness of hurricanes is probably different than most. But if we have a hurricane come through right now along the Texas coast, I'm really concerned that we're going to have trouble getting some of those communities back online because the transformers just aren't there. I can promise you, if Centerpoint or AEP needs 1,000 transformers right now because the hurricane came through, they're gonna have a challenge trying to figure that out. And so I think this is one of those strategic reserve type conversations that the state of Texas ought to be talking about, because it's going to create a challenge not just to continue to allow the economy to grow, but just to keep the folks in service that are here today. That's one of those items that keeps me up at night, Richard, quite frankly.
Well, it's a real deal, and your knowledge, of course, of the coast, having come from there, helps inform the things that we're doing here, and I think your idea of a strategic reserve on those kinds of things is definitely something very important, and that we will use going forward as we prepare our legislative agenda for the state. We're getting ready to start the public questions, so if you all have questions, please get ready. I'm going to ask one more question of Robert, and then we'll ask you all to come on up and ask a question or two. Robert, I understand that Saul's recently had a real scare at the H2 Oaks plant, the city center for desalination and aquifer storage on the southeast side of the county. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes. I will tell my communications department that the first notice I got of this was from my daughter. But it was a lightning strike in southern Bexar County, the first rain we've had in quite some time. Initially, everyone thought that it actually hit the facility, the plant there, but it hit close by, very close by. It hit an oil tanker that was located there. We own about 7,000 acres in southern Bexar County. We have a 99-year lease back to the original landowner. So if you go out to our plant, you'll see him grazing his cows, growing his crops. We take a very small footprint out of that 7,000 acres. But anyway, the lightning strike hit close enough to where electricity went down. Thank you, Rudy. You don't have any protection against lightning strikes,
Did you
right?
see the fireball that was created by that deal?
The fireball took out his infrastructure, which means it took out our infrastructure. One of the biggest bills that we pay is to CPS for that plant. Reverse osmosis, how we clean the water, is very energy intensive. So anyway, what we're doing, what we planned since last year, was to maximize the use of the storage of water that we have underground. That's originally Edwards water. We stored it in the Carrizo Aquifer for dry years. So we were doing a maximum amount of withdrawal as possible to test the system, to make sure that under an emergency or under a true drought, we would be able to run it at max capacity. So that we were doing a test, and not just for one day, for the entire summer and on into next year. And so the city of San Antonio was receiving about 25% of its supply from that plant. So as fast as the lightning strike can hit, it knocked us out, but we were very quick in being able to turn valves, hit buttons, click mouses to make sure that that 25% that was now not coming from that plant was coming from other sources. So I doubt if anybody of y'all noticed any kind of blip in when you flushed the toilet or when you turned on water. So we're very proud of that resiliency that we can say that when 25% of the supply went down, we can just quickly come back up. God was on our side that day because at that facility, we had 2 meetings with the credit agencies from New York. And they were thinking we weren't going to have it because it was destroyed. But we were able to tell them how we did it and the fact that 25% is gone, but we still have enough to bring water up and deliver to our customers. So hopefully, Doug, it results in a good credit rating increase.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. We averted disaster, and we're very proud of that. All right, so we're going to open it up to anybody here in the crowd that might have a question. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to ask? I've got more questions, by the way, but I wanted to provide you all an opportunity to come on up and ask the most burning question. Oh, no, Jim, that's trouble. Jim,
Richard,
go ahead.
Jim also was a former city employee, so.
That's
that was
right, that's
part
right.
of his record.
And CPS Energy employee.
That's right. He does it all.
Did he work at Saw's?
Actually.
I had the opportunity, I said no.
Thank you, Robert. So I think this question is probably for all three of you, because all your entities, including the River Authority and others in this room, were involved in the development of the Climate Adaptation Action Plan. A lot of infrastructure has got to be built. The CAP group, the 2 committees, or however many there are that are meeting regularly, I'm interested to know how that's going to factor into all this infrastructure we're going to be building in the future.
So I'll talk a little bit about one of the things that we're doing with all of the facility work that I talked about earlier. You know, when the city builds something, whether it's a fire station or an airport terminal, that building's going to be there for the next 50 to 60 years. And so those smart standards, which, you know, by all accounts have become normal almost in the development of facilities, but we're going to be very keenly aware of how we invest in our capital infrastructure plan as it relates to our municipal facilities. And that is included, that was a discussion that the council had a year and a half ago in advance of the bond program, and we took that into account as we laid out the estimates in the bond project. So we've got a number of big facilities that are in the bond program, and so we are, regardless of the cap plan, I think you know, maybe 10 years ago it was important to be LEED silver or LEED gold. A lot of those enhancements into buildings are becoming natural now, and it certainly will be a big component of the work out at the airport.
I guess I'll take the next one. You're actually in a LEED Gold certified building here at CPS Energy, which we're really proud of. We felt like it was important to set the right example as your utility company in the standard we set for our space here. You know, my job as a leader of CPS Energy isn't to debate the benefits or the cost of the climate action plan. We've got a goal to set as a community. City Council determines whether or not those goals are appropriate. But CPS Energy has been on a road for 30 years now to ensure that we're diversifying our portfolio. We're number 2 in the state of Texas in wind capacity. We're number 1 in the state of Texas in solar capacity. I just signed a 300 megawatt deal a couple months ago, and I'm about to sign another 180 megawatt deal here as soon as Benny puts it on my desk. And right now, I got to have as much capacity as I can possibly get of any kinds to serve what's a growing community, which is what the rate advisory and the city citizen advisory committees are looking at right now. But everything we do leads to achievement of our community's carbon reduction goals by 2030, by 2040, by 2050. CPS Energy will do its part, regardless of how decisions we make are characterized in the community. We could meet our goals with or without spruce. If we shut the spruce units down, maybe we get there a little quicker, but we're going to get there even if we continue running spruce, because we have to. And so every EV that we buy of our own, or that we create charging stations for in the community, you saw some recent articles about San Antonio being one of the fastest growing EV communities right now in the state of Texas. Everything we do has a benefit on the carbon side. I don't think we have done a great job tying our activity to the climate action and adaptation plan. That's something I've been talking with my staff about. We're going to put it all in one place so the community can weigh in on whether they think we're doing enough or not doing enough. But I can promise you that our strategy ensures that CPS Energy is going to do its part to help the community achieve its climate goals.
As far as saws, as you all know, most of our infrastructure is underground, never to be seen, and we don't want you to see it, especially the sewer pipes. So we don't build very much above ground. Even our wells and pump stations, there's just infrastructure above ground. So we're not that much involved in these types of issues. But how many of y'all know that air conditioning downtown is done by saws? Oh, not the engineers, you don't count. And these two guys know, of course. But San Antonio provides a majority of the cooling downtown and to the Port Authority. And so we're very involved in that. We're in the process of upgrading the system to make sure that any growth that the city does down there or is responsible for, such as the HB Zachary Hotel, takes advantage of our district cooling. And because it lowers the energy use. Less revenue for you, Rudy, sorry. So we're part of that in that situation. We're going to be talking to the city next week about the airport expansion to see if that can be part of this program to have this type of cooling. So Saul is involved in that, and we're doing our part on it.
Excellent. Well, we're getting close to the end of time here, and so I'm going to ask each of you, we just got more time. See how that works?
Let's see if you probably can hear me anyway. I wanted to ask this question because it's something that I've been concerned about as a council member, and I've asked the city manager about this, but I haven't had a chance to ask all three of you. But I think one of the concerns that I have is with the growth and the development that we're going through, and with our big bond issue and with all of the streets and drainage projects, with all of the work that SAWS has to do underground to extend to all of the development that's going on in many of the more rural areas of our county, and with the problems and concerns we've had about energy and in the expansion of energy, I wonder, do we have or do we need to do more about making sure we have the capacity and the capability of providing for all of this development? We're seeing more residential development, we're seeing more commercial development, so and many of the people in this room are involved in this. Do we have the capacity and the quality of people to continue providing all of this growth and development, not just this year, but over the next 3 years or 5 years or more than that? And so from your perspective, are you running into slowdowns or lack of the kind of workforce or construction or enterprises that can go ahead and help us reach these goals?
Councilman Courage, I'm just glad you didn't ask a question about our cash on hand.
That's later.
Go ahead.
Well, I will say this. I think, I look at the capacity question on an ERCOT-wide level because there has not been a major baseload plant of any kind, gas, coal, nuclear, anything. We've had a lot of what we call peaker units, the 40, 50 megawatt units at a time come online over 10 years. But we have not had a major power plant built in the state of Texas in the last 10 years when we're getting about 1,000 new people a day in Texas. And the state's going to have to figure out, what are we going to do about that? Those aren't issues that are going to be fixed overnight. It's going to take 3-4 years to get on if the legislature acted next session and said we're going to build 10,000 megawatts of gas capacity, it's going to take 3-4 years for that gas capacity to come online. You're not going to build your way out of this overnight. So conservation has to continue to be a key to how we deal with growth. That's why the STEP program that was hugely debated across our community was so important. I stood up and said that I believed in it then. I stand here today and I'll tell you I believe in it even more today because it helped us a couple of times this summer get through some really tight days. I do think we have some workforce challenges, Councilman. I got to figure out if we shut down our spruce units like the community's saying they want us to, how are we going to repurpose those employees to do other things? We can now own the solar resources due to the Inflation Reduction Act. They made some changes that make that possible. So that's one opportunity for us. But kids today don't want to work in 100 degrees in the summertime anymore. So I do think we have some labor issues that we're going to have to figure out if we're going to continue to grow at the pace we're growing.
Councilman Courage, if I understood your question correctly, you're talking capacity a lot about our ability to handle the growth internal and contractors or the companies out there. We are experiencing less contractors bidding for our work. A lot of the reason is because of the tremendous amount of construction going on in the private sector and the public sector. For example, in Houston, they're going through a consent decree for their sewer system, just like we did. We are. By the way, we're in year 9 of a 10-year consent decree, so we're almost done with it. And so there's a lot of companies concentrating over there. So yes, we do see that, so we have to adjust to it. We have to make sure we're able to do it. There's also a human component. Private industry, I'm looking at Pape, Dawson, steals our engineers. They can, oftentimes they're more attractive. Pay scale is much more attractive. And so we are suffering through that, just like the city did, just like Eric did, increasing the pay for their employees more than normal. We had to do that also more and sooner than normal. So we have to have those, be able to respond to those situations. So do we have the capacity to do it? Yes, we do. We just have to be much more quicker and innovative, especially with the contracting community and the all private sector that deals with SAWs, that provides their services to SAWs, is to make sure we have different contracts, different proposals that they can respond to, and hopefully still be able to provide that service, make their profit that SAWs can afford.
So we're tackling it similar to what Robert described, and you know, where we've seen some impact on terms of contractor capability, I think there's still room there. We're not seeing a big change there, but looking forward to the entire 2022 bond program and $116 million worth of street maintenance work and $21 million worth of sidewalk work, we do need to make sure that we've got the capacity to be able to swing. And part of what we utilize is our economic development department in making sure that we are doing that outreach constantly, and not just in terms of construction, because the city buys and contracts for a lot more than infrastructure on an annual basis. So that's a full-time job. The other part of that is making sure that from a labor standpoint, because frankly, I'm in competition with these two gentlemen up here and a lot of folks in the audience to make sure that we keep employees, that we recruit employees, we're retaining them. Because that's, you know, I don't have the luxury of not doing a project. We have to do the work that we're supposed to be doing. The third component of that I think is also critical is making sure that, you know, as we lay out what that work is, do we have the resources to do it? The proposed budget before the council adds 20 positions to the airport in advance of the terminal development program, and not just airport employees, but a whole team, 7 members of the DSD Development Services team that'll be dedicated to just all the inspections and permitting of that work out there. The airport will pay for it. The bond program, we didn't just look at public works and parks. We looked at adding an HR resource to make sure that we're keeping our positions filled and ahead of all of you in here and these two guys. Our additional work to work with contractors in our economic development department. So making sure that the largest bond program that the voters have ever approved, that we have enough horses in the stable to be able to deliver over 5 years. We've taken a little bit of a different approach, and those are the items that are before the council for their consideration next week.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our time. Let's give these fantastic individuals a round of applause. I can tell you, I've been the CEO of the Chamber for 14 years, and I have never felt more confident than I do today in the capacity and the ability and the smarts of these 3 gentlemen. Thank you, all 3 of you, for joining us today. You are all our personal friends, and you're fantastic professionals, and we are all blessed that you are leading your organizations into the future and that you are helping us take care of the business that we have, and that is the business of this community. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we say thank you, and we're adjourned.